Hi everybody, and welcome to today's special webinar event. I'm Terry Ryder, founder of hotspotting.com.au, and my special guest today is Tim Graham from Reventon. Tim, welcome.
Thanks, Terry. How are you?
Very good. I imagine you and the whole team at Reventon is very busy at the moment.
Yeah, it's a lot changed since we last spoke. Let's say that. It's been a crazy start to the year.
Yeah. Look, I think everybody who's got an interest in real estate across Australia knows that we're in the midst of a rising national property boom. And one of the challenges, I imagine, for businesses like you advising property investors on good places to buy to get growth and returns is finding markets that offer value, affordability, and the opportunity to buy sensibly, given that many markets are kind of frenetic and properties are selling so quickly.
Yeah.
So I think that what we want to do today is focus on a market that offers all sorts of potential for people in those circumstances.
Yeah. When you think about it, Terry, there's in different markets, you might have investors and in other markets where there's no investors, sometimes there's first home buyers that are driving it, but at the moment, it's everything. So you hit the nail on the head. Very hard to find value in a lot of the markets that we traditionally have been looking at over the last couple of years. Some of them just purely getting out of reach for some people. Yeah. We certainly found in the first quarter of this year, it's like there's a FOMO or something in the market as well. Doing some buyers advocacy work for a few clients, and my job as a buyers advocate is to find value, and it's become very difficult because what we perceive as value, it's selling for 10% higher than what we would say it's probably worth. So it makes it very difficult, but good problem to have. It makes it very interesting.
Yeah, and your focus is national, so you're looking right across the country for opportunities for your investor clients. And so today we're going to talk about one particularly good target that sort of ticks a lot of boxes. It's an area that offers affordability, it offers value. It's a market that isn't yet going bonkers, but it has great potential for growth. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about what that is and why your focus is in that particular market at the moment.
Well, look, traditionally over the last couple of years, we've always looked at regional areas, as you know. We've targeted areas like Geelong, Ballarat, Bendigo's, even Sunshine Coast. But unfortunately, these areas have become very, very popular. And as I mentioned before, trying to find value within these markets is becoming very difficult. And it's literally all over Australia at the moment. I had somebody talking to a builder last night, even somewhere down in Warragul, which is a fair way from Melbourne. There's a 60 lot subdivision, and they haven't actually launched it yet, but they've had 400 inquiries on blocks there. Oh, not inquiries, sorry, registrations of interest. So when you look at that, that's not typically a market that's been as strong as your Bendigos and Ballarats of the world, but it's made it very difficult. So we pivoted a little bit this year and have really started to educate our clients more on some interstate options. We've always had our eye on some markets within Queensland, but one market in particular that I've been looking at for about 4 or 5 years, we've really started to put a bit more emphasis on, and that area is the Greater Springfield region, which is 40 kilometres sort of southwest of Brisbane. It's a market, as I said, I've been keeping an eye on for some time, but we're always cautious. You don't want to jump into areas too soon. And, I think it was probably 4 or 5 years ago when I was there last, and, we're still waiting on train stations to open and, the shop store will get going, so to speak. But I went there in November last year, and I truly couldn't believe my eyes, like how far that area has come in the last couple of years. We're talking an $85 billion precinct. It's a new city. I'm going to show a clip throughout the webinar just so that people can sort of get an eye for what we're talking about here. But it's a terrific video because it sort of shows where we've come from there, what's happened so far, but also what the vision is for the future. And it's a $20 billion into the $85 billion project. And, property prices are really starting to take off there.
Yeah, look, I've got a bit of a connection with this story, which goes back quite a long way, more than 20 years, when I was perhaps doing some consultancy work, including PR, and one of the clients that I had to publicise was a businessman called Maha Sinathambi. Yeah. And he took me out to an area of Ipswich City, which was pretty much just a wasteland in terms of vacant country, and said, I'm going to build a city here. And I was quietly and privately thinking, wondering about the sound. I just thought maybe he was a little bit crazy, because it was just like, felt like the middle of nowhere. You're going to build a city here.
Yeah.
And here we are sort of 20, 25 years later, and it's a reality, and it's still a work in progress, but it's, you know, the achievement of taking what was just a vast area of empty land and turning it into what it is today, with a university campus, commercial precinct, private hospital, and masses of people living there in modern residential. Much of it with water focus at Springfield Lakes. It's an incredible achievement.
It really is. I think Springfield Lakes is probably the one that people have heard the most about. But, you know, really, I think where the success has come from is he's had really strong support from the big wigs, like your Lendleases, your Stocklands of the world. You know, even GE's gone and set up their national headquarters there. And obviously, you don't get population growth without jobs. So they've been really there's been a real focus for them to create one job per 3 people in population there. But you need to have things like your transport nodes and your hospitals and things like that. So now that all of that's open, there's just this buzz. Like, I truly couldn't believe driving around there. And it's very picturesque as well. They actually won, got voted the best community master plan community in the world. So we're not talking about something just in, you know, on a national scale being good. It's world class, truly.
Yeah, that's right. Perhaps we can just step back a bit for a moment. We'll come back and talk in more detail about that master plan community and the area in which it sits. But we'll talk about Brisbane more generally. The Greater Springfield area is part of Ipswich City, which is part of the Greater Brisbane area. And Brisbane has become one of the hot markets of Australia. It's been promising to for a number of years, and hasn't really done it. But now we see the evidence through a massive uplift in sales activity, and prices starting to respond. Also, the population data, which shows that Brisbane and Southeast Queensland is by far the national leader on population growth from internal migration. So people are moving from other parts of Australia to Brisbane and Southeast Queensland, and that's really a key factor at the moment, that finally Brisbane is having the boom that we've been expecting it to have.
Yeah, I think, I've said to you many a time, it feels like Brisbane's had the handbrake on for 10 years, but it's really starting to get the whip out now.
Yeah, and one of the big factors for me, as you know, we place a very high stock on the impact of infrastructure, new infrastructure spending, and the impact that has on driving residential property markets. Brisbane has lacked that until recently, but right now there's like $20 to $30 billion worth of projects, like the Cross River Rail project, the airport expansion, and a whole lot of other things that are now happening or poised to happen. And that's having an impact. But what's going to supercharge that, of course, is the announcement that Brisbane's almost certainly going to be hosting the 2032 Olympics. And that's going to necessitate an even greater investment in infrastructure. And since that Olympic announcement, there's been a further announcement that, for example, they're going to invest $1 billion on redeveloping the Gabba Sports Stadium, which is the main AFL and cricket venue for Brisbane, which will play a part in the Olympics of 2032. So that's a big factor.
Yeah, spending $1 billion there, you might get it almost on par with Melbourne Sporting Precinct.
Nothing will ever compete with the Melbourne Cricket Ground as a sporting venue, but they'll have a crack at it, and it's already a great facility. Yeah. I mean, I've been going to that particular venue for a lifetime, and it used to be a pretty down market. So, you know, most people were sitting on the hill. The facilities weren't great, but now it's a very modern, and it's going to be even more so once they've invested that $1 billion. But it's indicative of what's changing the Brisbane economy and the appeal of Brisbane, and the real estate market is at last responding to that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, when you think about it, even the casino precinct and everything that's going on there, you start to look at, you know, the sporting precinct there, a lot of the infrastructure that's gone into Brisbane, and it really does put it on a world stage, as well as Melbourne and Sydney. Yeah.
So I mentioned that the population data, it's a reality for the last several years, but particularly in 2020, as the figures show, that people are moving out of the biggest cities and they're moving to some of the smaller cities and the regional areas. Brisbane and Southeast Queensland is the biggest recipient of that trend, particularly in 2020, and that's a very important factor to consider when people are thinking about where they might invest their money.
And the other thing, historically, anytime there's been a downturn in the economy, Brisbane's always done very well. Off the back of recessions, Brisbane's always done well. And it's also been sheltered from those dips. When we do get hit with, a backlash in property, what happens is Sydney sort of dies straight away. Melbourne has a similar effect, but Brisbane's always been sheltered from that and always bounces back really, really strong off the back of any sort of downturn in the economy.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that we've noticed in the work that we do, every quarter we monitor what's happening with sales volumes, because we think that's a precursor to a rise in prices. And there's been absolutely an exponential uplift in Brisbane and in the June quarter of last year, the September quarter, then the December quarter, and now we've also seen evidence in the March quarter. So there's been a very, very steady but rapid increase in sales activity in Brisbane, and that's reflective of demand not only from within Brisbane but from outside of Queensland, interstate buyers focusing on the Brisbane market. And I think affordability's got a lot to do with that.
Affordability, yields, as I said, value as well. Some of the areas that we've been focusing on for many years, the value is just not there yet. The yields have dropped away. The entry price is too high. I saw some properties that came across my desk last week for areas like Ballarat, and they're 580,000 for a 4-bedroom. And I'm thinking to myself, that's Geelong pricing for one, but secondly, your rents just aren't going to be there at that price. Those same properties were honestly 100 grand cheaper last year.
Yeah. I was talking, I did a recent webinar. I was talking to mum and dad investors, and at one point the discussion turned to areas like Ipswich City. I was mentioning, median prices in some cases for some suburbs still in the 200,000s, some commonly in the 300,000s or the low to mid 400,000s. And the response was, you're talking about apartments, right? You're not talking about houses on land. And I said, no, I am talking about houses on land. These are people sitting in cities like Sydney and Melbourne are incredulous that there's the third biggest city in Australia, you can still get that kind of value within the Brisbane metropolitan area. But that's one of the great things that the city of Ipswich has to offer for people.
Yeah, I think especially areas like Sydney, which are starting to really, not that they haven't always had an interest in Brisbane as investors, but it's becoming more and more prominent now. And I think what people are starting to really cotton on to is that if you're trying to grow a portfolio, you still got to keep your debt levels low. Now, even if you go and buy a property worth $800,000 in New South Wales as your first investment, and it might jump up overnight to $1 million, 1.2 or something, but if you're still focusing on paying down your owner-occupied debt and you've got $800,000 on interest only, that growth that you're making on your investment's not really going to help you go again because your debt level's still quite high. Yeah. So what we've been talking to people about for a long time around the Geelong Ballarat markets, back in 2014-15, is we could get them in with a low debt of even high threes or something like that back then. And once we start to get a bit of equity in there, even if you're paying interest only on that loan, your debt level's still low, and the banks look very favourable on that. So we've been able to get people into 4 or 5 properties just by doing that, by keeping the debt level low and the yields quite high.
Yeah, so it's important to buy property at affordable prices with good rental yields. And if you're an investor out of Sydney and Melbourne, where you're lucky if you can get 3%, to learn that there's parts of the Brisbane market where you can get 4.5%, 5%, 5.5%. And again, I'm talking about Ipswich City, where it offers those sorts of rental yields and affordability, where you can you buying good property for less than $500,000.
We just did a case study on a client. It was their first investment property. Only had an income of 80,000, and we saw them back in maybe September last year, and they bought their first investment property on the Sunshine Coast. They paid $499 for it. We had it valued at $550. It's renting at $650 a week. Yeah. That's higher than 6%, 6.5% yield. So it's the rental yields that you're getting in these areas, and this is all getting driven by that migration of population going into the Southeast Queensland market. The rents are just unbelievable at the moment, and vacancy rates under 1%. Yeah.
Now, one of the things I really like about the general Ipswich market is that it doesn't just offer affordability. It offers actually proximity to major employment nodes. And I think that's one of the great things about this part of the Brisbane metropolitan area is that there are some very significant jobs nodes. People, the ideal for people is buying affordably close to where they work. And contrary to what some people think, most people don't work in the CBD of our major cities. Actually, most people work out of suburban employment nodes, and Ipswich has a lot of that to offer.
Yeah, well, you're choosing where to live based on where you work a lot of the time now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Like we look at Melbourne, there was 110,000 extra cars hit the road in the last 2 years. Right? People are spending 3 hours a day in a car. So it's becoming, and especially now that people are working from home more, people are getting the choice on where they want to live. But if you do have to commute to work, people don't want to be spending 3 hours in a car anymore. So the living close to work is a really big thing. The thing about that Ipswich market, or the Greater Springfield and Ipswich market, is it's so diverse with its economy as well. We love when we look at areas, we want strong population growth, really good infrastructure spending, but we also want to know that the employment within this area is diverse. So it's something we loved about the Geelong market was it was underpinned not just by one or two different industries like your mining or something like that, but it had health sector being the number one employer. You had education with Deakin University and some great public and private schools, and then it had a lot of public sector jobs as well. So WorkSafe, Vic Roads, things like that. We always say success leaves hints. So you look at the success we had in that Geelong market over the years, and then that's what moved us on to Ballarat. We had the same thing, $460 million redevelopment of the hospital, great universities there and strong public and private schools again. And then they had I don't know if you recall the GovHub building. It's about to open. It's a $100 million redevelopment of the Civic Hall. That's another 1,000 jobs with public sector. So one of the reasons we started to target this Springfield and Ipswich sector is because of those same things. You've got really good employment from diverse industries.
Yeah, and Ipswich City, I mean, it's got one of the major RAF bases in Australia, for example, on the periphery. It's got some very large commercial industrial estates. There's one very close to Greater Springfield in that Red Bank area, which is just outside of Greater Springfield. And one of the things that it's attracted is there was a multi-billion-dollar federal government contract to build vehicles for the Army.
Yeah, that's right.
The people who got that contract are actually building a factory to do that project in that Red Bank precinct, and it's just adding to the strength of the employment in that area. But of course, a development like Greater Springfield as a master planned suburb or city in its own right, it's generating its own employment because it's got a significant commercial precinct. It's got a very major shopping centre as the centre of a big retail precinct. It's got a private hospital. It's got a university campus.
Don't forget the biggest Bunnings I've ever seen.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of employment within the development itself. People who live there don't necessarily have to go very far to go to their jobs.
Yeah, there's something like, as well as the uni, there's like 11 schools or something. And for anybody who hasn't been there, you sort of drive around Springfield Central, and it's quite undulating, it's quite hilly. It's a very pretty place as well. But I remember there's a peak where you sort of look down, and for as far as the eye can see, there's just football fields and tennis courts and everything. And the education side of things in there, I think it's like 42,000 students just in that Springfield catchment.
Yeah. Okay, so it might be good to talk about some of the pricing there. So I mean, only yesterday I was analysing prices across Sydney, and what I know to be true, just reinforced it doing that exercise, is that even if you're out in the outer fringes, out west or southwest of Sydney, in the new suburbs, the new master plan communities, there's not much you can buy for under $600,000. Quite often a lot more. But in the Springfield community, you're paying prices typically in the 400,000s.
Yeah, it's edging closer to the 500 if it's still reasonably modern. In new, so we do both new and established. In the new build, looking at Kalina Estate, which is the Stocklands estate there, you're probably up over 600 for good size homes now. Yeah. I did a new build in Kalina. 280 metre square block, which is not a big block by any stretch of the imagination, but the client wanted a double story. So we did a double story there. That was about 570,000. Okay, so 280 metre square block. What I love about this Springfield pocket, though, is that you don't have to be in Springfield to find value. You literally go 10 minutes to the west and you've got Ripley, which is that's one of the largest priority development areas in Queensland. And then to the east of that, you've also like 5 minutes either side, you've got Greenbank. So we've got properties in those pockets which are sub 500, renting $1 per thousand. There's some really good value. Literally, if you think about the ripple effect of Springfield, you can be 10 minutes from your jobs there, or 10 minutes from the RAF Ambley Air Base, 10-15 minutes commute, and you're living in a beautiful brand new estate, and under 500,000.
And one of the factors about Springfield is that they extended rail links down there, so it's now got a couple of stations on a line that takes you to the centre of Brisbane.
Yep.
If you need to go there. But the future stages are going to go even further. So we're going to be extending those rail links out towards places like Ripley as well.
Yeah, that's right. I was in Brisbane only 3-4 weeks ago. I actually had to meet a client in Ripley. We were doing a buyer's advocacy work there. We did 11 inspections on the day. It was hectic. But it took me literally from, I stayed in the city at one of the Oaks there, and I came out. It took me 30 minutes to get from the CBD to Ripley. So the commute and connectivity is incredible. So we did all of our inspections for the day and then to take off to the airport. And what I really appreciated about the connectivity from there was I literally left Ripley. It would have taken me 35-40 minutes to get to the airport, not a single traffic light.
Really? So through the motorway network and the tunnels, you're able to get from Ripley to the
airport in 40 minutes or something. That's probably 55-60 kilometres, but the road network to get there is so easy. And then you mentioned the train stations. Obviously, train stations that stops at Springfield, but we'll go to Ripley next. That's a 40-minute train ride into the CBD.
Yeah, I mean, that's an impressive level of connectivity, because if you looked at it on a map, you probably would be incredulous that you could get from Ripley to the Brisbane airport that quickly, and certainly without encountering a traffic light. That's tremendous.
Yeah, I think one thing that's worth noting on this as well, for any listeners that aren't familiar with Springfield, we're not talking about something that's popped up overnight. This is 27 years they've been building this city. Yeah. So as I said, we've been keeping an eye on that for a long time, because you could see what the vision was. But as I said, you don't want to be the first ones in and you're sitting there waiting 10 years to see that infrastructure. But as I said, November, when I went up there last, went up there the first time in like 4 or 5 years. I couldn't believe everything was open. Like, I'm talking, that shopping centre it's got this great community feel there as well. But the shopping centre is absolutely buzzing. You've got 11 schools open, universities, train stations. It's really, set up well now.
Okay. Well, it might be an opportune time to actually have a look at a video clip that sort of encapsulates all of that. So if you like to share,
it goes for a couple of minutes, but I really think for any viewers that are looking at an investment around that 500,000 mark, you can't not have Springfield on the list. So bear with us for a couple of minutes, but it's a great video because it shows what's happened so far, but also what's still to come.
Okay.
3,000 hectares under one ownership does not exist anywhere in this country.
Greater Springfield is building a brand new city on the edge of Brisbane from scratch. This project represents home for 43,000 people and it has set a benchmark which everyone now aspires to try and achieve.
So we said we have to take it to the highest form of development. And that's when the idea of creating a new city came. The government said you have to have a validating legislation and an act of parliament. After 3.5 years, it was unanimously passed by all the 89 parliamentarians. And for the first time in the history of this country, the city was given birth on that night, other than the city of Canberra. After 28 years of working on this land and having created $18 billion worth of work, now we realize that the challenge going forward is 2.68 million square meters of development to be done.
We get good outcomes with our community. We aspire to create 1 job for every 3 people who live here. So we have higher rates on employment. We've got great schools. We have a young community. We have the people per household. And we know that this community achieves much better outcomes than any comparable community.
We are trying to create a world-leading city that has had the contribution of world-leading companies who want to play a part in the most unique city the world has not seen. We have got a number of major leading companies who have taken a position here. The University of Southern Queensland, we've got Mata, AU Seniors Living, we've got Burbank, who have developed a very successful major shopping center. Lend-Lease, who have been with us for 20 years, we have got a number of companies who are now joining us to make this a complete city.
Brentford is fantastic because we have a stadium that's under construction and a sporting team that plays in a national competition that's going to be headquartered here. We don't know of any other project anywhere that has got the fundamentals of this project.
Springfield City has achieved many things. We have been voted as the world's best master planning community. This is a complete community as far as possible.
Ideally, you're looking for organisations that can play or that can make decisions that benefit the whole and have an optimistic view about the future, because throughout this project we've seen a lot of people who never believed that any of the things we've achieved here would ever happen. After a while, you tend to be fairly strong in the belief that if you approach an opportunity in the right way and you engage with people in the right way, it tends to attract people who have the same level of aspiration.
This city of Springfield is a city where a person can work, live, play, and enjoy their life without having to travel too far.
Exponential growth is what's available to us here if we do things right and we continue to have an aspiration here which people want to be part of.
So there you go. That's great at Springfield.
Yeah, like it's so interesting to look at that, because as I said at the beginning, it must have been 30 years ago when I was standing on that land. It was just an empty big area of land with that man who was in the video, Maha Sinatham, and he said, "This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a city." And he, takes incredible vision and courage to actually take something like that on, and he's done it.
And the fact he's got both sides of Parliament's buy-in on this as well, it's a huge achievement.
Yeah, it is, and it's a great thing to visit because it's, as you say, such a vibrant community. And it's got pretty much everything that anybody could want, ranging from medical facilities, retail, educational facilities, and great places to live.
Even for retirement, Terry, they've got the ABO. I think it was one of the first vertical living retirement villages. So it's basically like staying at a 5-star hotel. It's not a bad way to do it.
Yeah. Okay. So what sort of opportunities are there, right now for investors to buy within this sort of area?
Look, it's an interesting market now. Like, as I said, we started selling there, I think probably January was the first sales that we did there, and both new and established. It's become very difficult in the new build space, to be honest. Land is becoming very, very hard, and that's in most decent pockets in Queensland. That's becoming very prevalent. But we do have access to some little infill sites that are coming up in and around that Springfield area in the coming months. So packages there are probably 480 to 520, and then we've also got some really good stuff in Greenbank, which would be similar. 470 is probably the entry price there, up to 500, and that's all 4-bedroom, good sized blocks, full turnkey, fixed price packages. And then in the established space, a lot of my clients that are looking for established within these areas are wanting the same type of thing. So good sized block, 4-bedders, 2 separate living, things like that. We're getting stuff that's probably 3 to 5 year old is what we're starting to see turn back onto the market. We snagged a really good opportunity there that my clients on that trip that I went up to recently. We got one for, it's actually a 12-month-old home for 470. So there's some good stuff there. But as I say, the more that people are starting to know about these areas, the more people are turning up on inspection day. So it is a lot more challenging than it was even. It sounds silly to think that in 3 months it's changed, but it generally has. And I think it's because people are getting bought out of so many other markets there. We're finding people that were even looking to buy established and are so sick of turning up to auctions here in Melbourne and getting blown out of the water by 5-10%. That is just, they've gone, listen, you guys have been talking about rent vesting for a long time. We're going to need to, because we need to get our money active. And they're just sick of turning up every day to every weekend to auctions and getting blown out of the water.
Yeah. But I did a webinar. I was invited as a guest presenter for a webinar about a month ago. And my task was to nominate areas around Australia where there are opportunities to buy sensibly, and markets that have great potential for growth but aren't yet frenetic, not as, as crazy and competitive as some markets are. And I nominated five locations, and Ipswich City was one of them. I think it's a great opportunity because it's part of the greater Brisbane market, which is moving into perhaps the first boom phase that the city generally has seen for about 10 years, at a time when there's a big infrastructure spend happening, and also at a time when the Olympics and prospects are giving huge further momentum to that market. So I thought that Ipswich City generally, and the Springfield area in particular, was a great opportunity for people to buy good real estate at affordable prices, good rental yields with prospects for growth. And I think you've probably targeted that area for the same reasons.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think we've talked about this a lot, Terry, looking at affordability and lifestyle. And, we talked about the areas like your Geelongs and your Ballarats and people making that tree change move. And I think you call it the mass exodus, or at least the media was calling it the mass exodus during COVID. But that had been happening for years. It's just that it became a hell of a lot more prevalent when COVID hit, or certainly off the back of, this back end of COVID that we're seeing now, where people are really weighing up, the flexibility of working from home. Do they need to be here? And, these trends that people are talking about and the speculation, you've only got to look at data to see that it's happening. I live on St Kilda Road here, and the vacancy rates are at 13%, and then any of the areas we've talked about today, I don't think you'll find one that's over 3%.
Well, no, I'm actually looking on just to the left of my screen here. I've got part of our report on the Ipswich area open, and the vacancy rates for the postcodes right throughout that area, including Springfield, and they're all under 1.5% at the moment. Some of them are below 1%. The postcode that includes Springfield is 0.9% vacancy rate. So in those circumstances, you're going to be getting very strong rentals, and the potential for growth, because when vacancies are that low, you can't fix that problem overnight. It's going to take time for supply to gradually lift vacancy rates. So the prospect for rental growth in the next few years is very good in this area. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you saw, I think it was The Project did a story the other night on the Sunshine Coast, and it's not just becoming an issue for people to find affordable housing in the rental space, but it's actually creating some homelessness in the Sunshine Coast. It's become a huge problem. People literally can't afford the rentals if they come about.
Well, I mean, I'm encountering it all the time, and people I know personally, as well as through the business, who anything that becomes available for rent, they turn up, and they're one of 40 or 50 parties competing for it, and so they, in desperation, they start considering caravan parks and those sorts of places, but they're all booked out as well, and literally nothing available. And it's actually it's a national crisis that our politicians aren't paying any attention to, and they really do need to. They actually should be introducing in the federal budget that's coming up incentives for investors to get into the market to create rental properties, because we have a desperate shortage right across the country, but it's very evident throughout Ipswich City as well.
It's amazing how quickly it can change. It was only a handful of years ago we were talking about all this oversupply, but it's all been soaked up. And I think something a lot of speculators don't talk about is the effect that China's had over the last couple of years on our market, with the lack of, obviously Australia and China's relationship's probably at an all-time low at the moment, but when APRA put the brakes on the foreign investment back in 2017, that's really stopped developers jumping on a plane and shooting off to China and coming home with an entire project sold out on a weekend. So you take that away, and all of a sudden there's less supply hitting the market. I think it was in Melbourne alone in 2019, there was 2017, sorry, there was 30,000 apartments hit the market here. And then you fast forward 3 years and it was something like 9,000. So that doesn't take long to get soaked up with our population growth.
Yeah, it's the absence of investors from the market over, say, the last 3 years. Because rental accommodation is a factor of the activity of investors. When investors aren't active, you're going to get vacancies falling in. They've fallen to the point where it's a national crisis that's just not getting the attention it deserves. But what that does mean is it's a great time to be a landlord in Australia.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And the thing is, we've got the best, financial climate for investors at the moment. So it's been a long time coming where, for many years, we've been sort of frowned upon as an investor. The banks didn't want to touch you in certain cases. All of that sort of going away, and we're starting to see the responsible lending loosen. We're starting to see, really good fixed rates for investors. Lots of exciting stuff.
Yeah, and the data out just this week, which was the ABS loans figures for March, showing that first real sign of major movement by investors. Most of the growth in loans in March came from investors entering the space. So that's finally starting to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tim, we've talked about Brisbane generally, Ipswich City as a market with great potential, and specifically the Springfield precinct. If people are interested and want to take action, what should they do?
They can visit our website, put through an inquiry, or speak to myself directly, tim.graham@reventon.com.au, or go to our website, reventon.com.au. And yeah, we'd love to help anybody who's looking. Obviously, we do look at it from a national perspective. We've got some other areas in Brisbane if the budgets we've talked about today didn't suit. I've got another one I'll keep up my sleeve. We're calling the next Ballarat, which is actually a Queensland one as well, similar population size there. But we've got some, we're starting to put our feet on the ground in a couple of new markets as well.
I have a sneaking suspicion I know the place you're talking about, but perhaps we can make it the subject of another podcast, because
it's especially in the land space, it's quite scarce there at the moment. So that's why I'm keeping up my sleeve. But it's a very exciting market as well.
All right. Okay, Tim Graham from Reventon. It's been great talking to you today. Let's do it again soon. Anybody who's interested in following up and asking a little bit more about the opportunity that exists in the Springfield area of Ipswich City in the Greater Brisbane area, contact Tim Graham at Reventon.
That's the one.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right.
Thanks so much, Terry. Until next time, and hopefully we'll see you back down here for a nice tucker again down in
there's nowhere I like to go when I'm traveling around Australia more than Melbourne. It's been a while, so yeah, hopefully very soon.
Look, one thing I will say before I go, our CEO, Chris, he's actually, Chris Christophe, he's actually the brand ambassador for the Vinnie CEO Sleep Out. We're actually holding a fundraiser in the city. It'll be on our website if anyone's interested. But last year he raised 110,000. And this year I think he's aiming for 200. But basically, even every sale that Reventon does in real estate, we donate $500 to it. So I think we did $7,500 to the charity last month. Anything that we put in, Chris matches as well. So we've got a really big task ahead of us. But for anybody who's interested, certainly jump on our website and have a look at that as well. It's 1st of June, a dinner at Maramio, a beautiful 5-star Italian restaurant in the city. It's $150 a ticket, and all proceeds will go to that charity as well.
Yeah, over $100,000. That's a great effort, and if you can achieve the goal of doubling that this year, that's very impressive.
Yeah,
and a worthy cause.
Yeah, it's a terrific cause.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Terry, thanks so much.
Okay, you're welcome. And talk again soon.
Thanks, everyone.